Hi, it's Sarah from South Fayette Township Library, and this week I'd like to recommend a nonfiction book. It's The Radium Girls, the dark story of America's shining women. This book was a New York Times bestseller, and it's written by Kate Moore. It's one of those stories that once you hear it, you're going to feel the same way as you did when you heard about Hidden Figures. Why hadn't I heard about this before? It's an extremely important story about the women who were dial painters at dial factories and what happened to them. Radium was discovered by Marie and Pierre Curie in 1898, and it was first used to treat cancer patients in 1902. In 1917, they started making a luminous paint that contained radium that was used to make glow-in-the-dark faces on watches and on clocks. 1917 was also the year that the U.S. entered the First World War, and soldiers really relied on glow-in-the-dark watches when they were in the trenches and at night. Radium was considered the most profound discovery in history at its time. And since it was used to cure cancer, it was believed that radium had health benefits. It could cure any ailment, in fact, anything from constipation to gout. Absolutely anything could be cured by radium. And it was advertised in products that you would never think of, like makeup. There were spas where you could go into water that had radium in it. It was supposed to be an elixir for you to keep you youthful. And fortunately, for many of these products, it was just false advertising. They didn't really contain radium because radium was really expensive. The radium dial factories employed hundreds of very young girls. Girls in their early 20s, in their teenage years, and when the radium dial factories became very busy during the war, it's recorded that some 13 and 14-year-old girls were dial painters. This job was really sought after for two main reasons. One, the dial painters were bringing home more money in most cases than their fathers were bringing home. So it paid very well. It was also really a source of pride that these girls were doing something to help the American troops in the war. And they would inscribe, painted by, very teeny tiny, a little message to the soldiers because it was a great source of pride. When the girls were at work in the radium dial factories, they had this glowing paint all over their bodies, speckles in their hair, on their eyes, in their clothes, on their skin, their hands, and their mouths. They were instructed by their employers to use a technique called lip pointing in order to paint these dials. And the way that you would lip point is that you'd take the paintbrush, dip it into the luminous paint that contained radium, and put it in between your lips to get a very fine point on the brush. Every time the girls put the brushes to their mouths, they were ingesting small quantities of radium. They weren't even worried about this because their employers told them that it was safe. Not only safe, but beneficial to their health. And everything was going along fine until these girls started getting sick. For some of the girls, they had horrific pain in their teeth, and they'd have to get their teeth pulled out, and they'd have horrible abscesses in their mouths. For others, they'd have pain in their hips, and it would give them problems walking. The doctors and the girls became convinced that it was the radium in this luminous paint that they were using that was causing their health problems. And they went to the people in charge of the radium dial factories. And now we have one of the best examples of corporate greed that you could possibly read about. The people running these factories wouldn't admit that radium was even harmful. And they certainly were not about to admit that these girls' ailments had anything to do with their employment as dial painters. But the girls just knew that they couldn't give up. And they fought bravely in court. And this is fascinating reading. Just for future girls, it was too late for them. They were fighting for labor laws so that healthy young girls wouldn't get radium poisoning like they had. This is such an important story, and Kate Moore really does great tribute to these women. You get to know who they are by name, what their family situation was. Were they married? Did they have children? Who their friends were at work? What they liked to do? Did they like to dance? One woman loved to wear hats. And they become so real to you as a reader. I hope you enjoy the Radium Girls. When you get the book, don't be intimidated because it's very, very thick. But a large portion at the back of the book are the author's notes, because Kate Moore did such extensive research when she wrote The Radium Girls. I hope you'll check it out. It's an important story. Let me know what you think, and have a great week.